So let's start the today's session. Today we'll go through one of the most important topic in development called test class code coverage. So before deploying the changes from one environment to any other environment, we must write the code coverage. A code coverage is nothing but just testing an application for a different set of data. So for example, you wrote an application and you are not sure how the application works for different sets of data. Like it can work for one record, but it may fail for 100 records. So in order to confirm the execution, generally we write the test class code coverage, and also Salesforce introduced some mechanism where each class, each class or trigger that you write should have at least 75% of code coverage. So the minimum code coverage required to deploy the changes from one to another environment is 75%, and this code coverage is related to only the Apex code. So like for triggers and classes means it can be a batch class or scheduling class or a web service class or a normal Apex class. The code coverage is required for Apex programming, so it's not required a code coverage for Visual Force language. I mean, for Visual Force language, there is no concept of code coverage, but for Apex programming, we must write the code coverage. Generally, we write the code coverage for classes or the triggers. They are the two main components in Apex programming. So, to move the changes from one to another environment, let's say you have an application in one Salesforce environment and you would like to move the same application to another client organization, another Salesforce organization. So you cannot, once the application is ready, you cannot move directly. So first thing is you need to verify the code coverage. You need to verify overall code coverage. A overall code coverage is nothing but, let's say if we have 10 components, let me give you an overview. So code coverage is nothing but, let's say you have 10 classes, class 1, class 2, class 3, class 4, etc. And you have a trigger also, trigger 1, trigger 2, and each component has, assume that each component has these lines of code. Just giving, for easier calculations, I'm just giving the count as 100, 200, or again 100, or 50 lines of code, 20 lines of code, 50 lines of code. So let's say these are the number of lines in each class. So to achieve some functionality, assume that we require to write these lines of code. How the code coverage calculates? The code coverage calculates number of lines covered by total lines. So it will take this percentage, number of lines covered by total lines into 100. So this is a formula, and suppose assume that you lines covered, how many lines it has covered. So for out of 100 lines, you have written a test class code coverage for 70 lines. So here, let's say here 160 lines. So here 90 lines. Assume that out of 50, you have written code coverage for 30 lines, 10 lines, and 40 lines, or 50 lines. So if you apply the formula, so see here is the formula. So what is the code coverage here? Code coverage. I'll show you, don't confuse, it's very easy. Just giving some idea before going through the code. So how it calculates. So equal to this this value divided by this value into 100. So you can see it's a 70 percentage of code coverage, and you can calculate the code coverage for others. So out of 20 lines, I have written a test class code coverage only for 10 lines. So you can see these are the code coverage percentages. So for an individual components, so generally it's better to have at least 75 percentage of code coverage, or even more than that, 75 or more than 75 percentage. So as a part of best practice, so make sure at least 80 or 82 or 80 to 100 percentage of code coverage. So 80 is more enough, and it's better if you have time, and if you have less code coverage for other components, you can try to write more code coverage. This is the best practice. So 80 to 100 means it can be up to 100. Minimum is 80, best practice. But as per the Salesforce, it's required 75 minimum code coverage. So, better to have at least 75 percentage of code coverage for individual elements. So the reason is, let's say this is a complete application. This is a complete application involved with these number of components, and when you are moving this application to the production, so now I would like to move the application to the production. So when you deploy these changes at a time, it will look for overall code coverage, overall code coverage percentage. So what is the overall code coverage percentage here? You can calculate, these are the actual code coverages equal to sum of all these percentages from H4 to H9. I'm just counting, I'm just calculating sum of all these code coverages. It will give sum divided by how many components it has, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6. See, this is the overall code coverage. So it will calculate the overall code coverage like this. Now we are good to move the application from one environment to another environment because it has overall of 75 percentage of code coverage. So if you have more than 75, let's say here I have 20 percentage. So now overall it is 83 percentage of code coverage. So like that you have to write the code coverage and look for the list of components which are in the application and check the overall code coverage before deploying to the production. So now, any questions so far?
No.
Yeah. So this is most important information. I will keep it here and share you. So go to the components you have. So now start working on code coverage. Let's say a simple example. I would like to move this employee VF page, this employee data VF page from this environment to some other environment, some other Salesforce organization. So as I told you, to deploy the changes, the first thing is forget about the deployment method. We'll talk about how to deploy. But before deploy, you have to make sure the code coverage. And now our target is how to write the code coverage. So here is a class. As I told you, we need to write the code coverage only for classes, not for the pages. So here is a class. I would like to write the test class here. How to write it? So you to write the test class, you have to follow some syntaxes which is supported in technology. Test class starts with at the rate is a test annotation. We call this is annotation. Annotation. Annotation is nothing but an identifier. At the rate is a test, which means you are going to define a test class. And class name, public class name is common. And instead of that, you have to define a test method. Static test method, which is a type of void, and any method name. My unit test. And this is the method declaration and a standard method. And this is a test class. The overall is a test class syntax. And inside of the test class, to start the testing, to start unit testing, you have to use test.start test and start test. In between that, we must write logic to cover the code, to make the code coverage. So these lines are the actual logic. Other than this line, the remaining lines are common to any test class. So only the logic part is different. The rest of the lines are common. So now we start working on code coverage so that you come to know. We'll try to write more test classes so it's easy to understand how it will be. So as per the naming convention, what we will do. So here the source class is employee data class just to identify the test classes. Test class is nothing but it's a new class. Right click on project and new and go to Apex class. And employee data class is the source class. You just put a test at the end just to identify which class it is. Because if you don't give the proper naming convention, later in the entire organization, it's very difficult to identify which test class refers which one, which source. So that's where I always give either a test keyword as a prefix or the suffix, so that it's easy to identify when you sort all the classes. So this will be next to the source class. It's easy to add elements to the chain set. At the same time, it's easy to find the class as well. So I'm going to change this at the rate is a test. Follow the same syntaxes. Not required to put either with sharing or without sharing in a test class. Static test method void my unit test. You can define any name. I'm just using my unit test. Test dot stopping the test coverage. Test dot stopping the test coverage. So in between that, write the logic. So what is the code actually I need to write? That's most important. So your logic depends on your source class. This is my source class. Just think about this is my source class. So one easy way is identify how many sockets you have. So here I have a one socket query which returns employee data. So I have a query on employee object. So this will retrieve actual data, but when you call this method, when you call here test class is nothing but you need to invoke each line from the each line of the source. You just need to call the methods or the constructor or whatever the code you have in a source class. You just need to call it from the test class. So first thing is the easy way is you need to identify how many socket queries you have written in the source class. I have one socket query. If you have one socket query or if you have n number of socket query, just check the socket query and insert that record. So because when you call it from the test class, it never, it doesn't pick the data, actual data from the database. It will pick the data from test class. So you have to create one employee record. I'm creating employee.name equal to test, employee.phone equal to some phone number, employee.country equal to some country name. Then insert that employee. So I just inserted an employee record. So means that this query has the data from test class. So it will return at least one record. It will return at least one record. That's the best practice. Then to run this logic, you have to, because this is a constructor in object-oriented programming language. When you define an instance for the class, constructor code will execute automatically. If it is a source method, then you have to invoke it manual. But here it's a constructor. Constructor will execute automatically when you define an instance. I'm defining an instance here. So this instance will invoke means execute the constructor in the source class. Now go to this class, employee data class. Go to this class.
What does the annotation do?
It identifies whether it is a source execution or the test execution. A keyword. Annotation is just a keyword which
So
makes it
if we say is test, then it identifies that it's a test.
correct. See, this is a test class. This is a test class I have written. And if you go to the source class, and this is a source class, you can see the code coverage. Code coverage is 0% now, right? Initially, the code coverage is 0%. I have written a test class to make the code coverage. You need to run it first. Here is the run test. Just go to that class and run test. So it will run and it is showing a success. Test methods passed. So there is no errors here. And go to your source and refresh. You can see the lines are marked in green. There is a plugin I have installed, that's where it is identifying how many lines are added. 100 lines. It has added 100 lines of code. So here the code coverage percentage is 100%. 100%. In our case, EMP data is the class name. EMP data is the class name. How many lines it has? 4 lines. 4 lines. And how many lines I covered? 4 lines. And code coverage percentage is 100%. So better to have at least 80%, but we made it 100%. So for smaller classes, it's easy to make it 100%. For bigger classes, probably take time. It will take time to make it 80, 90. That's why based on the project and based on the time you have, at least make 75% of code coverage. If you have enough time, just write the more code coverage. It always helps you because let's say here the code coverage is 100%. For another class, if you make 80 or if you make 80% of code coverage, so let's say there is another class, you have 80% of code coverage, then overall code coverage is 90%. So here, if you make only 60% of code coverage and overall is 80, so it helps. The additional code coverage helps for other components. So this is the source class and test class. This is the source class and this is the test class. So what you have to do while deploying the source class to other organizations, to the other environments, you have to add the test class as well. So before deploying, you need to validate it. So validation will happen only when it has a test class code coverage. Otherwise, your deployment will fail. You have to add the test class. So if a production has enough code coverage, then no need to. Even if you don't include a test class, by adding this class to the production, if it has even more than 75%, it will allow. It will calculate only overall code coverage. Let's go to other class now.
So is this always done using Eclipse, or can we use other development versions too?
Yeah, you need to write the same code. Eclipse is just an editor. How to put these lines in the class. Let me show you one class. For example, account data class. Here is account data class which has these lines of code. Account data class, one default constructor, and some one parameterized constructor. I would like to write the code coverage for this. So this is the class name, account data class. So let's write the code coverage in a developer editor itself, the server itself. Just click on new. How to write here, or you can write it in developer console. So write the logic. So here is a class. To call the constructor, you have to define an instance for it. Just defining an instance. Now, instance is created so that this code will execute. And check for the number of queries here. So I have only one query, which is an account. Just as a part of the best practice, create an account record. Insert to A1. Then we need to call this constructor. So here the constructor is account data class, which has other parameter. This is other parameter, employee data class controller. We need to define an instance for it first. Then we have to define another instance for your main class and pass that parameter. Because if you observe, this constructor has a parameter. To call this, initially when you define an instance, this will execute automatically, but it has a parameter too. So you just create an instance and pass that parameter type of employee data class. Save it. You cannot define a duplicate variable. Just change it to other variable. Just run test. So it is executed and go to source class. It has 0% now. Refresh. It has C. It has 100%. Now this component is can be deployed to the production. This is a test class and this is source class. So it's not required always to do 100% code coverage. Wherever it is possible, just make it 100%. So that for other classes where it has not possible 100% code coverage, or will it take it will take time to make 100% code coverage, and it reduces our this additional code coverage can be used for other elements. Now I have written a class. See, I have written a class in my server. You cannot find the class here. You cannot find this class in local. Let me search. I don't see this class here. Control Shift R for the search. If the class is existed, when you type something, it will show you the list of classes. So now to refresh, just right click on your project, post.com, and refresh from server. So that what are the additional changes that other developers can work. Other developers can work parallel in the same environment, or you may work sometimes directly in the server side. Those are not refreshed in your local Eclipse. So better when you start working on some a new fresh code, better to refresh. So when you refresh, it will automatically see. Now I have account data class test. It will come automatically. It will refresh all the existing server components to the Eclipse. So here in a test class, we generally define testers, start test, and stop test. The reason is it will make a single transaction. So it will execute the entire code in a single transaction. Sometimes when you face any issues, I mean when you face any limitation issues, we can make the transaction, we can split the transaction. So which means as of now in my test method, so assume that this is a test class. So as of now in my test class, I have only one test and one stop. Always you can define only one test and one stop. You cannot add multiple start and multiple stop here. It will allow a single method will allow only one start and one stop. If you want to split the logic, you can define one more method. You can define one more method and write the code for other classes as well. Here, so what is the purpose of start and stop? So when you reach some limitation, when you reach some governing limits, like you reach 100 circle queries for a specific lines of execution. For example, you reached more than 100 circle queries for 1 to 10 lines of code. For 1 to you have 10 lines of code. When you execute the 10 lines of code, that consumes 100 circle queries. Now what you can do in a test method, assume that this is the test class. In a test method, what you can do, you just put 5 lines of code here and 5 lines of code here. so that it will split into two different transactions. Is a one transaction and another transaction. In order to control the governing limits, in order to execute the code to identify the how many circles or how many DMS are consumed or what exactly the application will work for the larger amount of data, and we can split into two different transactions. So in the test class itself, so 5 lines of code and 5 lines of code. So here what it is,
Splitting it,
yeah,
sorry. So here we are splitting it after the stop test, right? That shouldn't be a problem.
yeah, that shouldn't be a problem. Once it is inside the class, once it is inside the class, then it will run. But sockets or what are the TMS that are consumed as part of test start and stop? That is a single transaction. Assume that you have 10 lines of code. Uh,
But I thought that according to the syntax, we need to write the logic within before the stop test.
Not it's not a mandatory, but as per the syntax and as per the method definitions, it says it is a stop and it is a stop, but it's not the mandatory to include everything in between that. So when you
So
face,
what does the stop test do?
so it will stop the transaction.
Hmm.
So once it is started to stop the transaction, and for the next 5 lines of code, it will treat as another transaction. It is a
So it
transaction
shouldn't
two.
stop test again.
It will not stop test. Not required. Even once we define a start and stop test, you cannot define another
Hmm.
start and stop. You just separate
Hmm.
the code so that the is part of transaction. It can be the second transaction. So let me give you. We have 10 lines of code, and the limit is 100 circle code. It means maximum one line consumes. Assume that maximum one line consumes 10 circle queries. When you split the transaction like this, these 5 lines of code will consume 50 lines of 50 circle queries and another these are 50 lines. In a single transaction, you have a limit of 50 lines of code. I mean 50 circle queries. So when you put all 10 lines here, it will consume 100 circle queries. So that's where instead of writing everything here, you can split it only when you face some limiting errors. Otherwise, you keep everything in start and stop first, right? So for a bigger application, sometimes you may face some DML limit or local limit. At the time, what you can do is just to split your code. Try to split the code into two different transactions, and governing limits will be calculated in transaction level. When you split,
So when we split the code into two different transactions, what is the limit of each transaction?
same limit, governing limits. Governing limits works for a transaction level. Yeah, in a single,
Okay.
in
So,
a single, in
so
a
that should
single,
be the total,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
So, okay. So maximum of 50 per transaction if we need to meet 100 socket.
No, here it will allow 100. It will allow 100 till 100. Again, it will allow till 100. So means in this particular transaction, you can consume 200 circle calls because you split it into two different transactions.
Okay.
So, but when you put it in a single transaction, then the maximum limit is 100.
So can we do more than two transactions?
We cannot do
Okay.
within start and stop. Otherwise, it can be outside the start and stop. Only two.
Okay.
But we can define a number of methods like this. This is a test method one. In the same class, just define one more method, test two. It has again two different transactions. Each method has two different transactions. And again, another method. So you can write the code coverage for class 1 at the same time. In another method, you can write the code coverage for class 2, and in another method, you can write the code coverage for class 3, etc. In a single class, you can write the code coverage for multiple classes in a single test class. As per the best practice, better to separate test class per source, because when you modify the source class, when you add some additional functionality in the source class, you have to modify the test class for that. So in general best practices, one source, one test class. We 1:1 ratio. We define the classes so that it will be easy for separating, or it will be easy for identifying based on class name. And write the code coverage for other classes too, so that will be easier. Upon data class test, upon data class. See here, this is another class, a smaller class, similar to our class only. Account data class. I would like to write the code coverage directly. Classes, right click, new, apex class, account data class test. Now, same syntax. You can just copy these lines. This is the standard syntax. Check, check the source class first. It has only one constructor. Constructor will run automatically when you define an instance for the class. I just defined an instance. But before that, check the queries as well. It has one circle query on account object. So you just need to insert an account record. Save it. Go to the class, account data class, and run it. This is account data class, and here is the test class. So when you make the naming convention, it is an advantage. So it will be one after the other. The source class has of now 0% of code coverage, and run test. So here the execution is super fast. The reason it has only a less number of lines. So if it has 200, 300 lines of code in a single class, maybe it will take a minute or 2 minutes, 3 minutes, based on number of lines. Source class, this is a test class. So here is another class, batch update controller. So how can you write the code coverage for this? So let's try to write code coverage for few classes. New text class, batch update controller test. Follow the syntax. Use test. Check the source class first. It has only run batch class method. So what you can do, create an instance for the class and call it. Just create this is the syntax. So create an instance for the class. This is the batch class name, and this is not the constructor. This is a method. So if it is a constructor, it will automatically execute based on your instance. But you have to, if it is a method, you have to call it manual. So batch update controller is a class name. Just go to source class and test class. This is a test class. Batch update controller. So check the initial code coverage 0 and now run it. So since these are the smaller classes, that's the execution is faster. And go to source and refresh. You can see the code coverage, and here you can observe some other as well. You are calling indirectly, you are calling run batch class and calling indirectly this phone update batch as well. So check the code coverage for phone update batch. You haven't tried the code coverage, but we are calling that in another method. You can see the code coverage 20%, 27% means that, so when you call this method, when you call this run batch class method, in internal inside the code, you are calling the batch as well. So means that's where it's running this much code coverage. So the reason is, see here, it has executed start method, but in the test class, you did not insert this record where phone equal to null. So you have to, when you insert the record, then this code will cover. So for example, here the query is an employee. This is the actual test class. I'm going to insert an employee record with phone number as a null. Test. Insert that employee. Save it. Now phone is null. I have inserted an employee record. When you run this test class, run it. There is an error. See here, there is an error. Exception, controller, minor line, some error. You can view the error message. Insert failed. Field custom validation action. Please phone number. Phone number is required. There is a validation rule in the trigger. There is a validation rule in the trigger which causes the phone number is null. So here, phone number is null means you cannot. I mean, there should be some phone number you must enter. So in that case, you cannot write the. You cannot make the code coverage. So what you can do? You need to use the flag. You need to use the boolean flag not to run your test class. because the validation is running in the test class. Or else what you can do, just go to the trigger. This is a trigger. Somewhere where create an account and employ that. Phone field is editable. Phone is mandatory check version 1. This is the one. Employee trigger helper before insert is the check. What you can do, how to put some condition. This code, I don't want to execute this code if not test dot is running test. If it is a running test, then don't execute this part of the code. Just put that simple condition so that this line never executes for test run. If it is a source execution, then it will execute. If it is not the test run, then only execute it. There is no impact. There is no functional change on that. So we're just making not to execute those validations when running the test class. Still, I have the error. Phone cannot be editable. Another error. Phone cannot be editable is another. This one. Phone cannot be editable. You have to add the same condition here also, not to run this validation rule. Then this one. So when you write the test class, you come to know these kind of errors. You have to solve one after the other until it is success. Now it is success. Now go to your source class and refresh. Still it has 100% code coverage. And go to other class. This is the batch class earlier. It has 27%. Now refresh. It has almost 72%. This is another method. Execute is another method related to the schedule. We just run it only the batch class. We just run it only the batch code. Start, execute, and finish. 72%. Still, if you want to execute this as well, you can do that. It's a manual execution. We'll just go to the test class. So here you just go to the test class and create an instance for your batch and the schedule context. Just define a schedule context first and execute. Call this execute method by passing that context. So this is the test class, run it again. So when you do some changes, you have to run it each time. Even when you add a single line of code, you must run it. This is the source has 100%, and due to the execution, this is the trigger. Trigger has some lines of code coverage. I tell you why the code coverage is executed, and check the batch as well. Batch has 100%. So you have to make the code coverage like this and see. I did not write the code coverage for trigger how it runs. The reason is when you insert a record. So this is the insert, employee insert. When you insert a record anywhere, it will check the events after insert and before insert and run that code. This has executed and this has executed and this has executed. This is a before update. Somewhere you are updating an employee as well. Somewhere even in the batch class, the trigger phone update class, you are updating the employee phone number. So it has entered inside as well. But we just restricted execution of this line. That's why this line is not executed. The lines which are in red color are not executed because we just added some condition not to execute those validation rows. How code coverage works like this. Even when you write some code somewhere that can cover some other logic based on the logic, the source code.
So when we say that we don't want to execute certain lines of code, then the code coverage won't be 100%, right?
Yeah, it won't be. We must execute each line. So here, if you see the trigger, uh, we did not execute two lines here, right?
Mm. Yeah.
You can see the code coverage 80%. There are overall 10 lines of code. Out of 10, it has executed 8, means that 80%.
Hmm.
So we cannot make everything 100%. We need to add some tweaks when it is required. So at the time, we may lose the code coverage.
So why are we ignoring the two triggers? I think I missed that part.
Because of validations, the validations are running. There is a validation because if you observe the phone mandatory check and phone cannot be readable. But as per the batch class, to execute the batch class on this query, phone should be null.
Okay.
So phone should be null to execute the batch class, but phone should not be null in the trigger as per the validation. So in order to
Mm-hmm.
satisfy both, our main target is to execute the batch class. We have written the test class. At the same time, we did not uh, running those validations using some conditions.
Okay.
So this is the concept where you learn more when you start working. Even I can give you 1,000 examples. The only problem is when you start working, then see the difference. We have written many classes, but the way of code is different from one to another. When you start working, you will come to know more and more. But this is a standard approach. Just say simple. Just your target is executing each line from the source class, from the test class. That should execute each line of the source where it covers the code. Total lines covered by number of lines. So I have added some Google Chrome plugin. That's where it is showing some line, some color. So this is the one. Let's take another example. Customer registration class. So this is a class, customer registration class. I would like to write the test class for it. Customer registration class test. So these are common lines. Just you need to change the class name. That's it. Now go to the source class and see here. You are registering an employee record. OPJ is an employee record. So you have to pass the data to OPJ so that this DML will never fail. See, first thing is the constructor code. Create an instance for it so that the constructor will be invoked. Before invoking the constructor, you have to prepare an employee data. OPJ.name equal to test and I'm not inserting anything here. I'm just prepared an instance of obj and you have to pass this obj to this uh, to this variable. Just copy it. Here the class variable is obj c dot obj equal to new employee. Again obj c dot obj equal to I'm passing my variable obj emp. Just given different name to identify obj emp so that so that so when I execute do save method, there is a DML event. When I execute a do save method, it will run this DML based on my data. I'm preparing the data set here, preparing an employee record. So when I run it, it will insert this record. That's where we have to give. Customer registration class, earlier 0%, now run it. There is no errors and check the source and code coverage, the 100%. The lines which are commented are not part of code coverage. I mean, they are just a dummy line code, not required anything. Just to it won't be part of code coverage or it won't be part of Apex code limitation. So means that in any organization, if you go to Apex classes, the first thing is to identify overall code coverage, just click on estimate your organizational code coverage. So currently in the entire organization, I have 28% of code coverage and better to make it at least 75% overall entire organization because there are few classes still left, so we didn't make the code coverage here. And it will show you the percentage of Apex used. As of now, we have used a total 11,648 characters of Apex code, and the test classes are not part of the classes which are not added with the rate is test annotation is not part of Apex limitation. Even the number of lines that you write is a limit in Salesforce. So here, this is the overall Apex limitation: 6 million characters allowed in developer edition. Because forget about the limitations in developer edition. In a developer edition, this is the limitation. But whereas in other edition, licensed edition, the limitations are different. This is the source class. This is the test class. Any questions so far?
No.
Yeah. So like this, we can write the code coverage for all the classes in the organization. So just yeah, it's the same way we can write it. There is nothing new. So that's all for test class code coverage. For a better practice, yeah, for a better practice, whenever you do some practice, just write the code coverage at that time itself. So that
Right.
yeah, and once you have the code coverage, you can start deploying the components from one environment to another environment. So tomorrow, today evening, same time, our regular time,
Okay.
we'll start working on the deployment methods.
Okay, sure.
Yeah. Sure, Anjali. Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye. See you.
Bye.